The night I ran out of money, I had already accepted that my life was finished. Then my retired German Shepherd smelled something on a photograph that had been mailed to my motel room. The man in that photograph had been dead for 11 years. He had served beside me in the Navy, and before he died, he apparently hid something in the Virginia mountains that people were still willing to kill for. I should have driven away. Atlas would not let me. And what that old dog found behind a rusted gate did not make me rich. It forced me to discover why 3 good men never came home. Stay with me, because the last thing my friend left behind changed everything I believed about his death and about my own life. If stories about loyalty, courage, and the bond between veterans and their dogs mean something to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories like this one. The first time Atlas saved my life, we were 8,000 miles from home. The second time, we were sitting beneath a flickering motel sign in Western Virginia, and I did not even know I needed saving. My name is Caleb Mercer. For most of my adult life, men called me Chief Mercer. I spent 22 years in the United States Navy, most of them inside the teams. I had crossed deserts under moonlight, stepped from helicopters into places that did not appear on ordinary maps, and learned how quickly a quiet night could turn into the worst night of your life. But none of that prepared me for being 58 years old, sitting alone inside a rusted Ford pickup, with everything I owned packed behind the seat. Atlas sat in the passenger side. He was a large German Shepherd, 87 pounds when the veterinarian weighed him that spring, with a charcoal saddle across his back and a scar running just beneath his left ear. People noticed that scar. They always asked what happened. I usually told them he caught it on some wire. That was easier than explaining the truth. The truth belonged to another country, another life, and 3 men whose names I still said quietly every Memorial Day. Rain struck the windshield in hard slanted lines. It was almost midnight. Across the parking lot, the Blue Ridge Motor Lodge glowed beneath a tired red sign that lost 1 letter every few seconds. Vacancy, then darkness. Vacancy, then disperse again. I had enough money for 1 more night. After that, I did not have a plan. That was the part I could never admit out loud. A Navy SEAL is supposed to have a plan. We are trained to think ahead. Alternate routes, secondary exits, emergency signals, medical contingencies, fuel, weather, water, ammunition. You prepare for everything that can go wrong. But somewhere along the way, I had failed to prepare for a life in which nobody needed me anymore. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. Atlas watched me. He had been doing that a lot lately, watching, waiting. The way dogs do when they know something is wrong, but cannot understand why a man keeps pretending everything is fine. I know, I said. His ears moved forward. I am working on it. He stared at me. I almost laughed. Do not give me that look. Atlas placed 1 paw on the center console. That was his answer. I reached over and scratched the thick fur beneath his collar. We are not sleeping in the truck tonight. His tail tapped once against the seat. That is right. We are living large. I climbed out into the rain. The cold hit immediately. Late October in the Virginia mountains had a way of turning rain into something that felt sharper than snow. I pulled my canvas jacket over my head and hurried toward the motel office. Behind me, Atlas waited inside the truck. He knew the routine. A dog that had once held position under gunfire could certainly wait 3 minutes in a parking lot. The office smelled like coffee, carpet cleaner, and cigarette smoke that had been buried under fresh paint. A small television played behind the counter. The woman working the night shift looked about 70. Gray hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She recognized me, she said. Afraid so. She looked past me toward the rain. Dog still with you? Always. She slid the registration card toward me. You know we charge $20 extra. I know. I took out my wallet. 3 20s, 2 5s, and 4 $1 bills. That was everything. The woman watched me count it. Her expression changed slightly, not pity. I had learned to recognize pity. This was something else. Concern, maybe. You working anywhere, Mr. Mercer? Starting soon. That was not exactly a lie. I had applied for a night security position at a distribution warehouse outside Roanoke. The manager said he would call. That had been 9 days ago. The woman pushed one of the 20s back toward me. Dog does not shed much. I looked at the bill. Ma'am. Take it. I cannot. You can. She raised one eyebrow. I own the place. There are moments when pride feels like armor. And there are moments when armor becomes too heavy to carry. I took the 20. Thank you. She nodded as if nothing had happened. Room 14. I turned toward the door. Mr. Mercer. I looked back. There was something delivered for you this afternoon. That stopped me. Nobody knew I was staying there. At least nobody I wanted to hear from. The woman bent beneath the counter and lifted a flat brown envelope. It came certified. My name was written across the front. Caleb Aaron Mercer, not Caleb Mercer, not Chief Mercer. My full name. Only a handful of people ever used the middle name. I walked back slowly. Who brought it? Mail carrier. No return address. She shook her head. I picked up the envelope. It was heavier than paper should have been. Something metal shifted inside. For reasons I cannot explain, the hair along my arms rose beneath my jacket. Atlas began barking outside. One bark, then another. Not panic, alert. The sound he used when something had changed. I looked through the office window. He was standing in the truck now, front paws planted on the seat, eyes locked on me. I should go. The woman handed me the room key. Good night, Mr. Mercer. I stepped back into the rain. Atlas stopped barking the moment I opened the truck door. His nose went straight to the envelope. Easy, he sniffed it once. Then again. His entire body changed. People who have never worked with military dogs sometimes think every reaction is excitement. It is not. A trained dog can become still in a way that means more than barking. Atlas froze. His nose hovered less than an inch from the envelope. His ears went forward. His breathing changed. I felt something cold move through my stomach. You know that smell? He looked at me. Rain hammered the roof. I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. A key, a photograph, and a folded sheet of paper. I picked up the photograph first. For several seconds, I forgot how to breathe. There were 6 men standing beneath the open ramp of a military helicopter. Dust behind them, gear hanging from their shoulders, faces tired and sunburned. One of them was me. I looked younger, 39, maybe 40. Atlas was in the photograph too. His coat was darker then, his eyes sharper. My hand rested on the back of his neck. Beside me stood a man with a crooked smile and a missing piece from his right eyebrow. Senior Chief Owen Rourke. I had not seen that photograph in almost 15 years. And Owen Rourke had been dead for 11. I sat back against the seat. The rain faded into the background. Some memories do not return gradually. They kicked the door down. A dry valley. A narrow road. A white building at the edge of a village. Radio traffic breaking apart in my headset. Owen shouting my name, Atlas pulling against his lead. Then an explosion so violent that I remembered the silence afterward more than the sound. 3 men never came home from that operation. Owen was one of them. I looked down at the photograph again. On the back someone had written 4 words. You never saw everything. I read them twice. Then a 3rd time. Atlas pushed his nose against my hand. My fingers had started trembling. Yeah, I swallowed. I see it, the key was next. Small, steel, modern. A black plastic head with the number 31 stamped into it. It looked like a storage locker key. The folded paper contained only an address. No explanation. No signature. Just an address outside a town called Bellwether, about 90 miles north. Underneath it was one sentence, come before Monday, or it will be gone. I checked the date on the motel office clock through the rain-streaked glass. Friday night I looked at Atlas. He stared back at me. No, his ears lifted. We are not doing this. Atlas continued staring. I spent half my life chasing things people hid in bad places. I am retired. His tail moved once. Very retired. Atlas leaned toward the photograph and sniffed Owen's face. Then he made a sound I had not heard in years, a low whine. It struck me harder than I expected. Atlas remembered him. Of course he did. Owen had been one of the first men outside the kennel staff that Atlas trusted. He used to carry dried beef in his pocket and pretend that had nothing to do with it. One night overseas, after a long mission, Owen had sat on an ammunition crate feeding Atlas tiny pieces while telling me he was going to buy a piece of mountain land when he got home. Not a big house, not a boat, not one of those sports cars young operators talked about buying. Land, trees, a creek, maybe an old barn. I want somewhere quiet, he told me. I remembered laughing at him. You would last 3 weeks. He grinned. Then I will buy goats. You know nothing about goats. I know they do not shoot at you. That had been Owen. Always joking until the moment joking stopped. He died 4 months later. I put the photograph down. Something did not make sense. Owen had no wife, no children. His parents had died years before him. And as far as I knew, everything he owned had been settled after his death. So who had this photograph? Who knew where I was, and why send it now? Lightning flashed beyond the motel roof. Atlas suddenly turned toward the rear window. His ears snapped upright. I followed his gaze. A dark sport utility vehicle sat near the far edge of the parking lot. Headlights off. Engine running. Maybe someone checking a phone. Maybe a traveler waiting out the rain. Maybe nothing. Then its headlights came on. The vehicle pulled slowly onto the highway and disappeared. Atlas continued staring after it. Probably nothing, I said. He looked at me. I did not believe myself either. I rented room 14. It had 1 bed, 1 chair, a small television bolted to a dresser, and curtains that never quite closed. To me, it looked like a palace. I dried Atlas with an old towel. He tolerated the process for about 30 seconds before shaking water across half the room. Thank you. His mouth opened in what looked suspiciously like a grin. I sat at the edge of the bed and studied the contents of the envelope again. The photograph, the key, the address. Come before Monday or it will be gone. I should have thrown everything away. That would have been the smart decision. I had no job, almost no money. My truck needed front brake pads. My relationship with my son had been reduced to Christmas messages and birthday calls that lasted less than 5 minutes. I had spent the previous year watching my life become smaller. First, I lost my wife, Emily. Cancer did what insurgents, storms, and 2 decades of military deployments never managed to do. It broke me. She fought for 18 months. I fought beside her. At least that was what I told myself. But there are battles no training prepares you for. The night she died, I sat beside her bed holding her hand. She opened her eyes once. Caleb, I am here, she smiled. You always say that. I did not understand. Then she whispered something I would replay 1,000 times afterward. But you are never really here anymore. She was not blaming me. That made it worse. Emily had spent 28 years loving a man who could walk into gender without hesitation, but could not explain what happened inside his own head. After she died, the house became unbearable. Every room contained her. Her mug beside the sink, her gardening gloves, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table. I sold the place 6 months later. I told everyone it was because I wanted something smaller. The truth was, I could not sleep there. Then I burned through more money than I should have helping my younger brother after his business failed. He promised to repay me. He meant it. Life simply did not cooperate. By that autumn, I had moved into the truck. Only Atlas seemed unsurprised. I looked at him now. He lay near the motel door, but he was not sleeping. His eyes remained fixed on the brown envelope. What are you seeing that I am not? His ears twitched. I unfolded the sheet again. Bellwether. 90 miles north, I remembered the town vaguely. An old railroad community near the George Washington National Forest. Population maybe a few hundred. Then another memory surfaced. Owen, the mountain property. Quiet. Trees, a creek. I stood so quickly the bed springs groaned. Atlas rose immediately. I walked to the window and stared into the rain. No way. Atlas came beside me. Owen said he wanted land in Virginia. I looked down at the address. Bellwether. My heart started beating harder. He had once mentioned a place outside Bellwether. I was almost certain of it. We had been overseas. It had been late. We were drinking terrible coffee from paper cups while waiting for a helicopter. He told me he had put money down on some old property his uncle knew about. I had forgotten completely. Until now, I looked at the photograph again. You never saw everything. Atlas pressed against my leg. What did he leave there? The dog watched me. For the first time in months, the emptiness inside my chest had been replaced by something else. Not hope, not yet suspicion, and maybe a little fear. But underneath those things was something I had almost forgotten. Purpose. I slept for less than 3 hours. At dawn, I packed the truck. The storm had moved east, leaving fog low across the highway. Atlas jumped into the passenger seat. I placed the key and photograph inside the center console. We go there. His ears lifted. We look around. His tail started moving. And then we leave. The tail moved faster. No hero work. Atlas sneezed. That is exactly what I mean. I started the engine. For the first few miles, neither of us made a sound. The mountains rose ahead beneath gray morning clouds. I kept thinking about Owen, about the photograph, about that vehicle in the motel parking lot, and the strange fact that someone had managed to find a man who had spent the last several weeks making sure nobody knew where he was. By late morning, we reached Bellwether. It was smaller than I remembered. An old brick post office, a diner, a church with a white steeple, a hardware store whose sign looked older than I was. The address led beyond town, past the last houses, past a narrow river, then onto a 2-lane road that climbed into thick forest. The pavement ended. Gravel began. Atlas suddenly sat straighter. What? He turned toward the passenger window, his nose lifted. We drove another half-mile, then I saw it. A rusted iron gate stretched across a dirt road. Beyond it, almost hidden by trees, stood an old wooden sign. The paint had nearly disappeared, but I could still read the name. Rourke Mill. I stopped the truck. For a long moment I just stared. Owen. My hand tightened around the steering wheel. The key in the console suddenly felt heavier. Atlas began whining. Easy. He ignored me. That was unusual. I stepped out. The forest was silent except for water running somewhere downhill. Atlas jumped down and immediately moved toward the gate. Then he stopped. Every muscle went rigid. His nose pointed toward the abandoned road beyond it. I knew that posture. I had seen it before raids, before explosions, before men discovered that a dog had sensed what they had missed. Atlas. He did not look at me. Instead, he moved to the ground beneath the gate and began scratching. Once, twice, then harder. His claws tore through wet leaves and dark soil. Atlas, stop. He kept digging. I walked closer. Then I saw metal beneath the leaves. Not part of the gate. A small square plate buried in the earth. I cleared the mud away with my boot. There were words stamped into it. Property under federal review. I stared at the sign. Then at the abandoned mill road. Federal review. Owen had been dead for 11 years. Why would federal investigators care about an abandoned piece of mountain property that belonged to him? Atlas suddenly stopped digging. His head turned sharply toward the road behind us. An engine. Coming fast, I looked back. A dark sport utility vehicle appeared around the curve. The same shape as the one I had seen outside the motel. My pulse slowed instead of rising. Old training. The body remembering what the mind wanted to forget. Atlas stepped in front of me. The vehicle stopped 20 yards away. Its engine remained running. Nobody got out. For several seconds we stared at the dark windshield. Then the driver window lowered. A man inside raised a phone. He took a photograph of me, then another of Atlas. The window went back up. The vehicle reversed down the road and disappeared around the bend. I stood there listening until the engine faded. Atlas growled low in his chest. I reached down and rested my hand on his neck. Yeah, partner. My eyes returned to the rusted gate. You were right. Whatever Owen Rourke had left in these mountains, somebody else knew I had come looking for it. And they were already watching us. For nearly a minute I stood beside that rusted gate and listened to the dark sport utility vehicle disappear down the mountain road. Atlas did not relax, neither did I. His body remained between me and the road, weight balanced forward, ears rigid. 11 years had passed since I wore a uniform for a living, but some habits never left. The first was to notice exits. The second was to remember vehicles. The third was never to ignore Atlas when he told me something was wrong. I walked back to the truck and opened the driver's door. Inside, Atlas looked toward the gate. Atlas, load. He obeyed immediately. I climbed in after him and locked the doors. Then I pulled the photograph from the center console. Owen Rourke smiled back at me from another lifetime. You never saw everything. I stared at those words. Atlas watched me. I know. You cannot answer. His ears moved. That has never stopped you from having opinions. I looked through the windshield. The iron gate remained ahead of us. Beyond it, the abandoned road disappeared between oak trees stripped nearly bare by autumn. The sensible decision was to leave. Drive back to Bellwether. Find a sheriff. Call somebody I still trusted. Maybe contact the Navy. Maybe forget the whole thing. Except whoever had mailed that envelope already knew where I was staying. They had photographed me. They knew Atlas was with me. And somehow they had connected us to Owen. Walking away would not make that disappear. I picked up the small steel key. 31. What do you think? Atlas looked toward the gate again. I sighed. That is what I was afraid you would say. The lock on the gate had been cut. I had not noticed it before. The chain looked intact from a distance, but when I stepped closer, I saw one link had been sliced cleanly through and wired back together. Someone had opened that gate recently. I unwound the wire. The chain dropped. The metal gate complained loudly as I pushed it inward. Atlas stayed close to my left leg. Easy, we followed the road on foot. I did not drive the truck inside. If someone closed that gate behind us, I wanted the vehicle pointed toward the highway. The dirt road descended through thick woods. Leaves covered nearly everything. Yet beneath them I could see fresh tire impressions. Wide tread, heavy vehicle, maybe the sport utility vehicle, maybe something else. About 300 yards in, the trees opened. Rourke Mill appeared below us. I stopped. It was not what I had imagined. The old mill was built along a narrow river that rushed between dark rocks. A long timber building stood beside the water, 3 stories high, with weathered boards and a roof patched in several places with rusted metal. An old water wheel leaned crooked against the stone foundation. Across the clearing stood a smaller building that might once have been an office. Behind that was a barn. All of it looked abandoned, but not untouched. A newer padlock hung from the office door. Fresh mud marked the steps, and somebody had replaced one of the broken windows with plywood. Atlas lowered his nose. He sniffed the ground near the edge of the clearing. Then he moved toward the office. Slow. He slowed. That word had saved more than one life overseas. Atlas knew it meant proceed, but think. He reached the porch, stopped, sniffed the lower step, then looked at me. I crouched beside him. There was a cigarette butt pressed into the mud. The paper was still white. It had not been there long. I touched the filter. Dry beneath the porch roof. Maybe hours. Maybe a day. Someone has been here. Atlas gave a low breath through his nose. I stood and studied the building. The padlock on the office door was modern. The key in my pocket suddenly seemed obvious. I pulled it out. 31. The lock had no number. Still, the key slid inside. One turn, click. I did not like how easily it opened. Atlas stepped forward. I held him back. Wait, I pushed the door inward. The smell hit first. Old paper, mouse droppings, motor oil. Wet timber. And beneath those things, something else. Atlas smelled it too. His head came up sharply, his nostrils worked. Then he pulled against my hand. Easy. The office was small. A desk sat beneath the window. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. A faded calendar still hung beside a corkboard. The year printed at the top was 2015. My stomach tightened. The year Owen died. Atlas crossed the room. He went directly to a narrow door near the back. No searching. No hesitation. Straight to it. He scratched once, then looked at me. I opened the door. A set of wooden stairs descended into darkness. Cold air drifted upward, of course. Atlas glanced at me. It could never be a bright room with coffee. I took a flashlight from my jacket. We went down. The basement was built from old stone. Metal shelves lined the walls. Most were empty. At the far end stood a row of green steel lockers. Numbers had been painted on each door. 27, 28, 29, 30, then 31. I stopped. Atlas walked past me. He pressed his nose against locker 31. His tail lowered, not fear, recognition. I came beside him. "What do you smell?" He sniffed again. Then his ears relaxed slightly. He made that same quiet whine I had heard at the motel. My throat tightened. Owen Atlas touched his nose to the steel. I suddenly understood. Dogs remember people through scent in a way we never can. I did not know whether any trace could truly survive 11 years inside metal. Maybe Atlas was reacting to leather, oil, old training gear. Maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see, but he had led me directly there. I inserted the key. The lock turned. Inside hung an old brown field jacket. Beneath it sat a pair of boots, a canvas bag, a wooden box, and a red dog leash. I reached for the leash. Atlas moved closer. There were teeth marks near the handle, tiny marks from when he was younger. I remembered them. Owen used to steal Atlas from me on quiet mornings and take him running. He claimed my dog needed better company. I had forgotten that leash existed. Son of a gun. I rubbed my thumb across the worn leather. Atlas sniffed it slowly. Then he rested his head against my hip. I stood there longer than I intended. There are people you lose once. Then there are people you lose again when you find something they touched. I put the leash back. The canvas bag contained ordinary things. Work gloves, a flashlight, several notebooks. The wooden box was different. It had my name carved into the lid. Caleb. I sat down on an overturned crate. Atlas stayed beside me. The box opened without a lock. Inside was a small handheld audio recorder, 2 photographs, a sealed envelope, and a silver identification tag. I knew the tag immediately, Owen's. My hand closed around it. I had been there when his personal effects were packed. His identification tags were supposed to have gone to his younger sister. I had attended the memorial. I had spoken to her afterward. She died 3 years later. So why was one here? I set it down. One of the photographs showed Rourke Mill in summer. The place looked alive. Roof repaired, windows open. Owen stood on the porch. Beside him were 2 men I did not recognize. Behind them stood Atlas. I brought the photograph closer. No, Atlas looked up. The date written on the back was 6 weeks before our final deployment. I remembered Owen taking leave. I did not remember him bringing Atlas here. Then I looked more carefully. It was not Atlas. The dog was almost identical. German Shepherd. Dark saddle, same build, but a white mark on the chest made the difference. I turned the photograph over. 3 names were written beneath the date. Owen Rourke, Daniel Voss, Peter Hale. The last name struck something in my memory. Peter Hale. I had heard it before, not in the teams. Contractor. Logistics, I think. Someone connected to the operation where Owen died. I stared at the photograph. The second picture was worse. It showed a dirt road overseas, 3 armored vehicles. A white building in the distance, this valley where Owen was killed. Across the bottom somebody had written the second vehicle was never supposed to be there. My mouth went dry. I knew that road. I could still see it in my sleep. Our patrol had been redirected less than an hour before the explosion. We were told an intelligence source had identified a weapons cache. The information looked good. Too good. We went in. The first explosive detonated near the rear vehicle. The second hit Owen's position. 3 men died. 2 others never fully recovered. Atlas found a third device before it could kill more of us. The investigation later concluded that insurgents had prepared the ambush days in advance. I had accepted that. We all had. I picked up the audio recorder. The battery compartment held 2 old batteries, dead. But beside the recorder lay a small plastic bag containing fresh ones. Someone had planned this carefully. I replaced them. The screen lit 1 file. No date. I pressed play. Static filled the basement, then a voice. I stopped breathing. Owen, older in the recording than I remembered him in my dreams. Calmer. Caleb, if you are hearing this, then either I finally found the courage to tell you something, or I did not live long enough to do it myself. I looked at Atlas. The dog stared at the recorder. Owen's voice continued, "You are going to be angry. I would be too." Then silence for several seconds. I bought Rourke Mill because I needed somewhere outside the system. Somewhere nobody would think to look. My hand tightened around the recorder. Before our last deployment, a friend came to me with records showing equipment transfers connected to one of our contract support groups. Radios, vehicle parts, fuel. Nothing dramatic on paper. Owen paused, but the numbers were wrong. I leaned closer. So I checked. His voice changed, no humor now. What I found scared me. Somebody was moving equipment through shell companies. I thought it was theft. Black market sales, maybe. Static cracked across the speaker. Then I found evidence that one of those companies had access to our movement schedules. Cold sensation moved through my chest. Atlas stood. Owen continued. I told myself that did not mean anything. Contractors see schedules. Drivers see schedules. Logistics people see schedules. Another pause. Then I closed my eyes. I knew what came next. Owen's voice grew quieter. The route we were ordered onto the morning I recorded this matches a corridor mentioned in one of the files I found. My eyes opened. The recording had been made before the mission. Before he died, I copied what I could. I left it somewhere safe. Not here. I stared around the basement. Caleb, if something happens to me, do not assume the official story is the whole story. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Then Owen said something that made Atlas suddenly lift his head. And if Atlas is still with you, trust him. I looked down at the dog. Owen laughed softly through the speaker. That stubborn animal notices more than both of us. For 1 second I smiled. Then the voice became serious again. The mill is only the first stop. Paper rustled in the recording. There is a room beneath the turbine house. I marked the entrance. The recording clicked. Then Owen added one final sentence. If the red ledger is gone, Caleb, leave immediately. Because that means somebody got here before you. The file ended. Silence filled the basement. Atlas stared toward the stairs. I replayed the final sentence in my head, the red ledger. I looked inside the wooden box. No ledger. I searched the canvas bag. Nothing. The locker shelves. Nothing. My breathing changed. Atlas, his ears moved forward. We are leaving. Then a sound came from upstairs, a dull wooden thump. Both of us froze. Another sound, footsteps. Slow. Someone had entered the office. Atlas moved in front of me, his lips pulled back. I turned off the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the basement. The footsteps crossed the floor above us. 1, 2, 3, then stopped directly over the stairs. Atlas growled so quietly I felt it more than heard it. A man's voice came from above. You found the locker faster than I expected. My hand tightened around Owen's identification tag. I did not answer. The man laughed once. You do not remember me, do you, Mercer? Something in that voice moved through 11 years of memory. I had heard it through radios, briefings, helicopter noise. And then I knew. Peter Hale, the third name written on the photograph. The contractor connected to the operation that killed Owen. He was standing less than 20 feet above me, and somehow, after 11 years, he knew exactly where to find us. Peter Hale stood somewhere at the top of the basement stairs. I could not see him, but I remembered the voice. That was the strange thing about voices from war. Faces faded, names sometimes blurred, but certain voices remained exactly where you left them. His had come through radios during convoy briefings. Calm, professional, always sounding like he knew a little more than everyone else in the room. Atlas remained in front of me. His body was completely still. Peter Hale, I said. Silent, then he chuckled. So you do remember. I remember enough. That depends. The wooden floor creaked above us. You should come upstairs, Caleb. I did not move. Why? Because I would rather have a conversation than a misunderstanding. You followed me from the motel. Another pause. I kept an eye on you. That is not what I said. Atlas shifted slightly. I placed a hand against his back. The growl in his chest remained low. Peter spoke again. You have something that does not belong to you. I looked down at the wooden box, Owen's recorder, his identification tag, the photographs. He put my name on it. I am not talking about the box. Then I understood. The red ledger. Silence answered me. That was enough. I stood slowly. Atlas glanced back. Stay close. We climbed the stairs. The office seemed brighter than before. Gray daylight came through the dirty windows. Peter stood near the desk. He looked older than the man I remembered, late 60s. Silver hair, thin face, dark field coat, but the posture was familiar. Relaxed shoulders, hands visible. The kind of stance men use when they want you to notice that they are not threatening you, which usually means they are. He looked at Atlas. Well, Atlas stared back. Peter's expression changed for half a second. Recognition. That dog is still alive. He is tougher than most people. I remember, growled. Peter smiled faintly. And apparently he remembers too. I stepped between them. What do you want? Peter looked at the basement door. Owen found things he did not understand. He seemed to understand plenty. No. Peter shook his head. He understood pieces. Then explained the rest. Peter walked toward the window. I watched both of his hands. Old instincts, he noticed. You really never stopped, did you? Stopped what? Looking for the threat in the room. I said nothing. Peter stared outside. Do you know what logistics looks like during a long war, Caleb? Paperwork. It looks like millions of parts moving through dozens of countries. Fuel, radios, batteries, medical gear, construction equipment, vehicle armor, local contracts, ground transport. He turned toward me. Chaos. What does that have to do with Owen? Everything. Peter folded his arms. During those years, people discovered that chaos could hide almost anything. Money. Money was the easy part. His voice flattened. Information was worth more. The room felt colder. Movement schedules. Peter looked at me sometimes. My jaw tightened. People died, yes. There was no hesitation. That answer told me more about him than any denial could have. Atlas moved one step forward. Peter noticed. You think I killed Owen? Did you? No. Did you know the route was compromised? Peter did not answer immediately. Outside, the river moved behind the mill. I could hear water rushing through rocks. Finally, Peter spoke. I suspected someone had access. You suspect, and you said nothing. I said plenty. To who? That is where things became complicated. I laughed once. There was no humor in it. Complicated. 3 men died. I know. You do not get to say complicated. Peter's face tightened. For 11 years I have lived with that morning. So have I. His eyes moved to Atlas. I know. Atlas had begun breathing harder. Not fear, anger. Peter stepped away from the window. Owen believed the leak came from a contractor network. Was he wrong? Partly. What does that mean? It means the contractors were being used. By who? Peter hesitated. That hesitation mattered. Atlas suddenly turned his head toward the rear wall. His ears lifted. I followed his gaze. Then I heard it. A vehicle outside. Peter heard it, too. His expression changed. Not surprise, fear. That got my attention. You brought someone? No, the engine stopped. Doors open, more than one. Peter moved toward me. We need to leave. I almost laughed. You expect me to follow you? If you want to stay alive. Atlas barked once. Footsteps moved across the gravel outside. Peter reached beneath his coat. My hand moved automatically. He froze, easy. He slowly removed a pistol, then placed it on the desk. I am not pointing this at you. Who is outside? Peter looked toward the door. The reason Owen hid the ledger. The office went silent. A man shouted from outside. Peter. Peter closed his eyes briefly. Someone knew he was here. The voice came again. You should have called. Peter looked at me. The turbine house. What? Owen mentioned it, did he not? I said nothing. Peter cursed under his breath. Of course he did. He pointed toward the back window. There is an old maintenance tunnel below the turbine room. It runs toward the river. You know the mill. I helped Owen buy it. That surprised me. The front porch creaked. Atlas moved between me and the door. Peter picked up his pistol again. This time I did not stop him. Who are they? Not the people you want finding that recorder. The front door shook. Someone tried the handle. Locked. Peter nodded toward the rear. Now, Caleb. The glass in the front window shattered. Atlas lunged backward from the sound, then immediately recovered. I did not wait. We moved. Peter fired once, toward the broken window. I heard shouting. Then we were out the rear door. The river noise swallowed everything. The turbine house stood about 40 yards away. Atlas ran ahead. I followed. Peter came behind us. Another gunshot cracked across the clearing. Wood splintered near the doorframe. Atlas barked sharply. Go! We reached the turbine house. Its doors were chained shut. Peter raised the pistol. Stand back, no. I stepped toward the chain. The lock was old, rust around the shackle. I grabbed a steel bar leaning beside the wall. One hard strike, nothing another. The lock cracked. Third strike, it broke. We pulled the doors open. Darkness. The old turbine room smelled of wet iron and river mud. Rusting machinery filled most of the space. A massive wheel assembly ran along one wall. Atlas stopped. His nose went to the floor. Owen said the entrance was marked. I switched on my flashlight. Peter closed the doors behind us. Voices outside. Getting closer. Atlas moved toward the far corner. He began sniffing along a row of old floor plates. Then he stopped. A steel plate beneath him had a faded red line painted across one edge. Atlas, he scratched at it. Peter stared. Still doing your job. I found a recessed handle. The plate lifted. Beneath it, a narrow ladder descended. Peter looked toward the door. We are out of time. I sent Atlas first. He climbed carefully. Then I followed. Peter came last and lowered the plate above us. Darkness. The tunnel was narrow. Stone on one side, concrete on the other. Water dripped somewhere ahead. Atlas moved slowly. My flashlight beam bounced along the walls. Behind us, muffled voices entered the turbine house. Peter whispered, "Keep moving." We went deeper. The passage descended under the mill. After maybe 50 feet, Atlas stopped. His body stiffened. "What is it?" He turned toward the wall, sniffed, then scratched. Not again. I almost smiled despite everything. Peter stepped closer. There, a metal ring was mounted low in the stone. I pulled it. A hidden panel shifted. Behind it was a steel door. No lock, just a wheel handle. Peter stared at it. I never knew about this. That mattered too. I turned the wheel. The seal released. Cold air rushed out. The room beyond was dry, small. Maybe 12 feet across, metal shelves, plastic storage tubs. One desk, one chair, and a red leather ledger sitting in the center of the desk. Nobody spoke. Atlas entered first. He sniffed the room. Then the ledger. I looked at Peter. His face had gone pale. "That is it?" He nodded. "That is what everyone has been looking for." "Everyone?" "Open it." I picked it up. Heavy, the leather was cracked with age. Inside were handwritten names, dates, company names, account numbers, contract codes. Some I recognized. Most I did not. Then I found a page with a familiar operation number. My chest tightened. There were 5 names beside it. One was Owen Rourke. One was Peter Hale. 2 meant nothing to me. The 5th stopped me. Rear Admiral Thomas Vale. I stared at the name. "No." Peter looked away. "You knew." I suspected. "Vale signed off on half our regional tasking." "I know." "He attended Owen's memorial." "I know." My voice rose. "He spoke to Owen's mother." "I was there." I slammed the ledger onto the desk. "You knew this and said nothing?" "I did not have the ledger." "You had enough." Peter's jaw tightened. "No, I had suspicion." "Owen had evidence." "Then why did he not turn it over?" "He tried." I froze. Peter continued. 3 weeks before the mission, Owen copied part of what he found and sent it through a secure channel. To who? An inspector. What happened? He disappeared from the investigation. What does that mean? It means he retired suddenly. Peter leaned against the wall. A month later, his house burned. Silence. The tunnel beyond the room seemed very far away. Atlas came beside me. I rested a hand on his neck. Peter pointed to the ledger. Owen realized the network reached farther than he thought. What network? Procurement people, contractors, brokers, men who discovered they could sell information about convoys and routes through intermediaries, and nobody would see the full chain. My stomach turned. For money, he paused, and influence. I looked at the ledger again. What happened to the second vehicle? Peter exhaled slowly. I was waiting for you to ask. I said nothing. The convoy manifest showed 4 vehicles. I know, you actually had 5, I remembered. A local support truck joined us just before the route change. White cab. I had forgotten, Peter continued. That truck was never assigned to your unit. The room seemed to narrow. Who was driving it? No one ever found out. After the blast? Peter shook his head. It disappeared before the ambush started. A memory hit me. Dust radio chatter. Owen shouting about a vehicle. I had always thought he meant one of ours. Peter looked at me carefully. Owen saw it leave. My pulse changed. That is why he moved forward. Yes, he was trying to warn us. Yes, I closed my eye. For 11 years, one memory had haunted me more than the explosion. Owen running, not toward cover, toward my position. I had never understood why. Now I did. He knew. Peter nodded. He knew the route was burned. Atlas pressed closer. I opened my eyes and I saw the truck. Too late. Did you warn anyone? I tried. Peter looked down. My transmission failed. Convenient. I know how that sounds. Yes, his face hardened. I spent years proving it was not an accident. Did you? Eventually. Where is the proof? Peter nodded toward the ledger. Part of it is there. Part? Owen kept copies of radio maintenance records. I flipped through pages. Nothing. Peter scanned the shelves. Maybe another box. Atlas suddenly growled. Footsteps in the tunnel. Close. More than one person. Peter raised his pistol. I turned off the flashlight. Darkness dropped over us. A beam appeared beneath the steel door. Someone was outside. Then a voice, calm, older. You always were stubborn, Peter. Peter's face changed. I recognized the voice before I recognized the name. Rear Admiral Thomas Vale, the man who had pinned medals on men he had sent into danger. The man who stood beneath a flag at Owen Rourke's memorial and called him a hero. His voice came through the door again. Caleb Mercer. My stomach tightened. So you finally made it, Atlas growled. Vale laughed softly. I wondered how long it would take that dog to lead you here. I stepped closer to the door. What do you want? The ledger. You mean the evidence. I mean something you do not understand. I understand men died. That is precisely why you should listen. Peter whispered, do not. Vale heard him. Peter has been telling himself a heroic story for years. Peter gripped the pistol tighter. Vale continued. Ask him why Owen died before Peter did. I looked at Peter. He did not meet my eyes. What does he mean? Peter said nothing. Vale's voice came through the steel. Ask him, Caleb. I turned toward Peter. What does he mean? Peter swallowed. Caleb. What does he mean? Peter finally looked at me. His face told me I was about to hear something I did not want to hear. Owen called me the night before the mission. My chest tightened. He said he had proof. Peter's voice dropped. He wanted me to help him get it out. And I told him to wait. Why? Because I was scared. Atlas shifted. Peter looked at the floor. I told him not to act until I could verify who was involved. My voice became quiet. You told him to wait, yes. He went on the mission anyway. Yes, and he died. Peter nodded. Vale spoke from outside. That is not all. Peter closed his eyes. Do not. Vale ignored him. Tell Caleb what you did with Owen's message. I stared at Peter. What message? Peter looked older suddenly. Not 68. 80. Defeated. After the ambush, I found a voicemail from Owen. My mouth went dry. What did it say? Peter's voice cracked for the first time. He said the leak came from inside command. The steel room felt smaller. What did you do with it? Peter whispered. I deleted it. I stepped backward. Atlas turned toward me. Peter raised both hands. I was afraid you deleted it. I had a family. So did Owen. I know you deleted the last warning from a dead man. I know. Something inside me broke loose. I grabbed Peter by the coat and slammed him against the stone wall. Atlas barked. Peter did not resist. You let us believe it was just an ambush. I know. 3 men died. I know. I pulled closer. For 11 years his eyes filled. I know. Then Atlas barked again. Not at Peter. At the steel door. A grinding sound came from the wheel handle. Someone outside was opening it. Peter pushed me away. Caleb. The wheel turned slowly. Atlas planted himself between us and the door. I looked at the red ledger, at Owen's name, at Vale's, at 11 years of lies bound inside cracked leather. Then I understood something. Vale had not come to kill us yet. If he wanted us dead, he could have handled that outside. He needed the ledger, which meant the ledger still mattered. I grabbed it. Peter looked at me. There's another way out. What? Owen told me once the old mill tunnels connected to the river overflow. You said you did not know this room existed. I did not. Then how do you know? He described the original foundation. The door moved an inch, light cut through the gap. I scanned the back wall. Stone, shelves, desk, nothing. Then Atlas ran past me. He went directly to the lowest shelf and shoved his nose beneath it. Move it. Peter and I grabbed the steel frame heavy. We pulled together. The shelf scraped across the floor. Behind it was a narrow black opening. River noise rushed through. Peter stared Owen. I almost laughed. Even dead, he had built an exit. Atlas crawled through first. I shoved the ledger inside my coat. Peter followed him. The steel door behind us opened wider. Vale shouted Caleb. I entered the passage. Before I disappeared, I looked back. A flashlight beam sliced into the hidden room. I could not see Vale yet. But I heard him. You walk out with that book, you will destroy people who had nothing to do with Owen's death. I paused. Peter hissed from the tunnel. Caleb Vale continued. Families, careers, men who served beside you. I stared into the light. You should have thought about that 11 years ago. Then I crawled into the darkness. The passage sloped downward. Cold water reached my boots. Atlas moved ahead. Peter followed behind me. The roar of the river grew louder. Then the tunnel opened beneath a stone arch near the waterline. Daylight appeared. We climbed out onto a narrow bank below the mill. Atlas shook mud from his coat. I looked back. No one followed yet. Peter bent over, breathing hard. We need to get to your truck. No, he looked up. What? They know where it is. Then, where do you suggest we go? I looked across the river. An old service road climbed through the forest on the opposite bank. Atlas was already staring toward it. Owen built this place because he needed somewhere nobody would think to look. Peter followed my eyes, then understood. You think there is more? I know there is. How? I pulled the photograph from my jacket. The one showing Owen standing outside the mill. Behind him, nearly hidden by sunlight, was a wooden sign I had barely noticed before. I wiped mud from it. One word had been burned into the wood. Marrow. Peter's expression changed. What? You know it. He did not answer. I stepped closer. What is marrow? Peter looked toward the mountain above us. Then he said something that made the red ledger suddenly feel like the smaller secret. Marrow was Owen's backup. For what? Peter stared at me. For everything. Atlas barked once and started toward the river crossing. I looked at the mountain, at the dark forest rising beyond the water, at the place Owen had prepared before he died, and for the first time since this began, I understood that he had never expected the mill alone to survive. He had expected someone to come for it, someone powerful, someone patient, and somewhere higher in those mountains, Owen Rourke had hidden the part of the truth he believed even the red ledger could not protect. The river crossing was colder than I expected. By the time Peter and I reached the opposite bank, water had soaked through the tops of my boots and turned every step into a dull ache. Atlas shook himself once. Water sprayed across both of us. Peter wiped his face. I see his sense of humor survived. It was never very good. Atlas looked back at me. I pointed uphill. Go. He moved into the trees. The service road had almost disappeared beneath years of leaves, roots, and fallen branches. But it was still there. We climbed slowly. The higher we went, the farther the mill disappeared behind us. I kept the red ledger beneath my jacket. Every few minutes I touched it. Not because I feared losing it, because I still had trouble believing it existed. Names, dates, money, routes. Men who had spent years being called honorable. Some of them probably were. That was what bothered me most. A ledger could tell you who received money. It could not always tell you why. Ahead of me, Peter struggled with the grade. He had been breathing hard for the last half mile. I did not slow down. Part of me wanted him exhausted. Part of me wanted him uncomfortable. A smaller and uglier part wanted him to suffer. He had deleted Owen's last warning. Fear or no fear, I could not make that disappear. Peter seemed to know what I was thinking. You have every right to hate me. I am not wasting energy on hate. That sounds like something you tell yourself. I stopped. Atlas stopped with me. Peter came to a halt several yards behind. You want to talk about what I tell myself? He said nothing. I told myself Owen died because we were unlucky. Peter looked toward the trees. I told myself the intelligence failed. My voice tightened. I told myself I should have seen the road change coming. Caleb, for 11 years I thought maybe I missed something that could have saved him. You did not. You knew something was wrong, yes. And you stayed quiet. Yes, I looked at him. Peter did not defend himself. That made it harder. I had wanted excuses. Excuses are easier to hate. Instead, he gave me the truth. I was a coward, he said. The forest went quiet around us. I had a wife, 2 daughters. A mortgage. My oldest was starting college. He swallowed. I convinced myself that keeping them safe was the same thing as doing the right thing. It was not, no. His answer came immediately. It was not. Atlas walked between us. He sniffed Peter's hand. Peter did not move. After a moment, Atlas continued uphill. I stared at the dog. That is more forgiveness than I have. Peter nodded. I know. We kept walking. About 40 minutes later, Atlas left the road. He turned sharply into a stand of mountain laurel and disappeared beneath the branches. Atlas, he barked once. I followed. Peter came behind me. Beyond the brush, the ground leveled. A small clearing opened beneath tall pines. At first I saw nothing unusual. Then the shape emerged. A cabin, not really a cabin. More like a hunting shelter. Low roof, stone chimney, weathered boards, built into the side of the mountain so carefully that from below it almost vanished into the hillside. Above the door, a single word had been carved into a wooden beam. Marrow. Peter stopped. My God, you have been here? No, but you knew the name. He stared at the building. Owen used it once. When? The night he called me. I turned. You did not mention that, he said. If the mill is burned, go to the Marrow. And you never came? Peter shook his head. I did not know what it meant. Atlas walked toward the cabin and stopped 10 feet from the porch. His head lowered. His nose worked. I recognized the change. Something is wrong. Peter looked around. I do not see anything. That is why we have him. Moved left. 1 step. Another. Then froze beside a patch of leaves. I crouched. A thin line ran from the ground toward the porch. Wire. Not explosive. Too visible for that. I traced it carefully. It connected to a crude alarm made from metal cans beneath the steps. Peter exhaled. Owen. I pointed. The wire was bright. New. Owen has been dead 11 years. Peter's face tightened. Someone had reset the alarm recently. We moved around the side of the cabin. Atlas stayed ahead. Near the rear wall we found footprints. Boots. At least 2 people. Fresh enough that rain had not erased the edges. Maybe from that morning. Maybe yesterday. Peter whispered. Vale. Maybe. You think someone else is involved? I looked at the tracks. At this point, I assume everyone is involved until they prove otherwise. Peter almost smiled. That sounds more like the Caleb I remember. You never knew me. The smile disappeared. Atlas reached the back door. It stood open half an inch. I drew the small utility knife I kept on my belt. Not much, better than nothing. Peter still had his pistol. I looked at it. How many rounds? 7. Keep it down unless we need it. He nodded. I pushed the door. The cabin opened into one room. 2 bunks, wood stove, table, shelves, nothing luxurious, nothing personal. Everything had been built for function. Atlas entered. He sniffed slowly, then moved toward the table. There was a coffee cup sitting on it. Peter touched the side. His eyes widened. Warm. We looked at each other. Someone had been here minutes earlier. Atlas turned toward the bedroom wall. A growl formed. Then we heard it, a faint metallic click outside. Peter moved first, down. The front window exploded. Glass sprayed across the room. A round chunched into the wall above us. Atlas barked. Peter fired once through the broken frame. I grabbed the table and pulled it sideways. Back room. There is no back room. There is always another room with Owen. Another shot struck the door frame. Atlas ran toward the stone fireplace. He sniffed, scratched once at the floor. I almost laughed. Of course, Peter crawled toward him. A metal loop sat flush with the boards beside the hearth. I pulled, nothing, locked. Atlas began pawing at the stone. Not the floor. The stone. I looked closer. One rock near the base of the fireplace was darker than the others. I pressed, a latch released. The floor panel lifted. Peter stared at me. You have got to be kidding, move. Atlas went first. We dropped into a shallow crawl space. I lowered the panel above us. The shooting stopped. For a few seconds, the only sound was our breathing. Then footsteps entered the cabin. Slow, careful. Someone moved across the room above us. Atlas was motionless. I felt his body against my leg. The steps stopped near the fireplace. Peter raised his pistol. I shook my head. Too close, too confined. Then a voice came through the floor. Mercer. Not Vale, a younger man. Leave the ledger and walk away. I said nothing. You have no idea what you are carrying. Peter whispered near my ear. Daniel Voss. The second name from the photograph. I looked at him. You are sure? Peter nodded. My mind returned to that old picture. Owen, Peter, Daniel Voss. 3 men standing beside the mill. One dead, one ashamed, one hunting us. Voss spoke again. Owen trusted the wrong people. Peter closed his eyes. Maybe that sentence hurt him. Maybe it was meant to. I looked around the crawl space. There was a narrow tunnel leading deeper beneath the cabin. Owen had built another exit, or another hiding place. We crawled. The passage widened after 20 feet. Then my hand touched concrete. I lifted my flashlight. A steel door stood ahead, no handle, only a keypad. Peter stared. This is new. How new? I mean, Owen never mentioned electronics. I looked closer. The keypad had no power. Beside it was a mechanical key slot. Atlas sniffed the door, then the pocket of my jacket. The key, the one stamped 31. I pulled it out. Peter stared. You think the same key opens this? There is one way to find out. It fit. I turned it. The door opened. The room beyond was no bunker. It was an archive. Metal shelves ran from floor to ceiling. Weatherproof cases. Hard drives sealed in plastic. Paper files, photographs. Maps, and on the far wall a series of names had been written by hand. Some were crossed out, some circled, some underlined. At the center was one name larger than the others. Thomas Vale. Beneath it Daniel Voss, then 3 words. Not. Peter stared. What does that mean? It means Vale was not running it. I moved closer. Several photographs had been pinned beside the names. Politicians, contractors, military officers, businessmen. Most were older images, some I recognized, some I did not. Then I saw Owen, a photograph I had never seen. He stood beside another man outside a government building. The man's face had been circled. Written beneath it was, Peter went pale. You know him, yes. Who is he? Peter looked at me. He ran a private security group that handled logistics across 3 countries. That sounds like a contractor. It was more than that. Peter moved closer to the wall. He recruited former intelligence officers, military planners, communications people. For what? I stared at the photographs. He was the top? Peter shook his head slowly. If Owen wrote not the top, then Warren might have been a broker. For who, I do not know. Atlas moved toward one of the shelves. He began sniffing the lowest case. Thence he sat. I opened it. Inside were several hard drives. One envelope rested on top. My name was written across it again. Caleb Mercer. I stared at the handwriting. Owen Peter stepped back. That was written before he died. I opened it. The letter inside was short. Caleb, if you reached Marrow, then I failed to fix this before it reached you. Do not trust the ledger by itself. Money can be planted. Names can be forged. The proof is in the recordings. The drive marked blue contains the original communications. Do not give it to command. Do not give it to a contractor. Do not give it to anyone who approaches you first. Find someone who has nothing to gain. And Caleb, there is one more thing. Peter Hale knows more than he thinks he does. He is weak when he is afraid, but he is not evil. Give him one chance to tell the truth. Only one. I stopped reading. Peter looked at me. What does it say? I handed him the letter. He read it slowly. When he reached the last lines, his hands began trembling. Owen had known. He had known Peter might fail him, and still left room for forgiveness. Peter sat on a storage case. For a long time he said nothing. Then he covered his face with both hands. I do not deserve that. No, he looked up. I continued. But it was not written to decide what you deserve. Peter looked at the letter again. Atlas walked over and sat beside him. Peter stared at the dog. You really are terrible at holding grudges. Atlas rested his head against Peter's knee. Something changed in the room. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of a choice. I searched the case. One hard drive had a strip of blue tape across it. I picked it up. This is the proof stood, if it still works. Above us, a heavy crash echoed through the cabin. Voss had found the hidden panel. We need to move. Peter tucked Owen's letter into his coat, then stopped. He looked at me. I have something you need to know. Now, especially now. Atlas turned toward him. Peter took a breath. Vale did not order the ambush. I stared. You told me he was involved. He was. That is not what I said. Peter's voice lowered. Vale sold schedules. The words came slowly. He thought the information was being used to steer contracts, manipulate risk ratings, make certain transportation companies look unsafe so Warren's companies could win work. My stomach tightened. He sold operational routes without knowing they would be attacked. Yes. And after Owen died, he realized what Warren was actually doing. What did he do? Peter looked toward the ceiling. He tried to get out, and Warren showed him what would happen to his family. That changed the shape of everything. It did not excuse Vale, but it explained why a man powerful enough to frighten others had sounded afraid at the mill. I looked at Peter. Then why is Vale chasing the ledger? Because the ledger makes him look like the architect, and he wants to destroy it. Yes, or control the story. Peter nodded. Probably both. Footstep entered the crawlspace behind us. Voss was coming. I grabbed the blue drive. Peter raised his pistol. Atlas growled toward the tunnel. I scanned the room. No second door, no obvious exit. For once, Owen had given us nowhere else to run. Then I saw something on the far wall, a red lever. Emergency release. I pulled it. Nothing happened. Peter looked upward. Again I pulled harder. A section of the wall released with a deep mechanical groan. Cold daylight poured into the room. The archive had been built directly into the mountain. The hidden door opened onto a steep slope above the river valley. Wind rushed inside. Atlas ran toward it, then stopped. He looked back at me. Behind us, Voss entered the archive. He held a handgun with both hands. Do not. Peter turned. Voss aimed at him. You should have stayed quiet, Peter. Peter stood between Voss and me. For 11 years I did. Voss's face was calm. And you survived. Peter looked at Owen's letter in his hand. No, his voice was quiet. I existed. Voss moved the weapon toward me. The drive, Mercer. I held it up. This Voss's eyes locked onto it. There it was. Fear, not anger. Fear. That told me everything I needed to know. The drive mattered more than the ledger. Maybe more than all of us. I stepped backward toward the open mountainside. You want it? Put it down. Atlas moved beside me. Voss adjusted his aim. Control your dog. I almost smiled. You never worked with him, did you? Voss frowned. No. That is unfortunate. Atlas had been watching my left hand. Waiting. The same way he had waited years earlier, in places far more dangerous than this. But I opened my fingers, a small gesture, almost nothing. Atlas moved, not at Voss, at the metal shelving beside him. He slammed into the bottom rack. The shelf rocked. Voss turned instinctively. Peter lunged. The gun fired. The sound filled the archive. I hit the floor. Atlas barked. Peter crashed into Voss. The pistol slid across the concrete. I kicked it away. Voss struck Peter hard in the face. Peter fell. Voss reached toward his coat. Atlas stepped between us. Teeth exposed. A sound came from deep in his chest that I had heard only a few times in my life. Voss. Atlas moved one step closer. Do not, I said. Voss stared at me. I was not talking to Atlas. Peter got back to his feet. Blood ran from his lip. He picked up the pistol from the floor. For several seconds, the three of us stood there. Then Voss smiled. You think one drive changes anything? I looked at him. No. His smile widened. Good. I slipped the drive inside my jacket. But 3 copies might. The smile vanished. I was bluffing. Voss did not know that, and in that instant I saw exactly how afraid he was of whatever Owen had recorded. Outside, somewhere far below us, engines approached the mountain. More vehicles. Peter heard them too. So who is that? Voss laughed. You're about to find out. Atlas moved toward the opening. His ears stood high. I joined him. Through the trees below, dark vehicles were climbing the abandoned service road. At least 4. Too many for Vale alone. Too organized for local law enforcement. Peter came beside me. His face went gray. They found Marrow. No. I watched the convoy. They already knew where it was. Atlas looked back toward the blue drive, hidden beneath my jacket. For 11 years, Owen Rourke had protected the truth with locked rooms, hidden roads, false trails, and the memory of one German shepherd he believed might someday return. Now there were no more rooms left to open, no more tunnels left to crawl through. We had the evidence, and everyone who wanted it was climbing the mountain toward us. 4 dark vehicles climbed the mountain road below us. Nobody inside the archive spoke. Peter stood near the open mountainside door with blood drying at the corner of his mouth. Daniel Voss remained several feet away. Atlas stood between him and us. And inside my jacket, the blue hard drive pressed against my ribs. 11 years of truth, maybe more. Voss looked down at the approaching vehicles and smiled. You should put the drive down, Mercer. I ignored him. They are not coming to negotiate. Who are they? You already know. No, I stepped closer. I know you want me to think they belong to Warren. His smile changed, just slightly. That was enough. I had spent too many years watching men lie in rooms where mistakes got people killed. A lie rarely announces itself. Sometimes it is just a pause, a breath, a smile that lasts half a second too long. You do not know who is in those vehicles, I said. Voss stared at me. Peter moved toward the opening. The first vehicle disappeared behind the trees, then another. Atlas suddenly turned. His ears moved forward. His nose lifted toward the wind. I watched him. His tail lowered, but he did not growl. That interested me. When strangers approached, Atlas usually decided what he thought before I did. Right now he was alert, but not threatened. Then we heard the first door slam below us. Another followed. Voices, commands. Clear, controlled. Not the loose movement of hired muscle. Peter looked at me. You hear that? I nodded. Then a voice carried through the trees. Federal agents. Stay where you are. Voss stopped smiling. I looked at him. That is unfortunate. His face went hard. You have no idea what you are doing, maybe. Another voice ordered everyone near the cabin to show their hands. Peter slowly lowered his pistol to the floor. I stepped away from it. Atlas stayed close to me. Voss looked toward the open mountainside. There was a steep trail descending through the trees. He measured it with his eyes. I saw the decision happen. Do not, he ran. Atlas moved before I finished the word. Voss made it maybe 12 feet. Atlas struck him behind the knees. Both went down hard in the leaves. Voss rolled and reached toward his ankle. Atlas holed. The dog froze over him, teeth inches from Voss's wrist. That hand stopped moving. I walked over slowly. A small handgun was strapped beneath his pant leg. I removed it and threw it well beyond his reach. Voss glared up at me. He is not on you, Atlas growled. Yet Peter joined me. You always did like that dog more than people. I looked at him. Today is not helping your side. For the first time since the mill, Peter laughed. It did not last long. Men and women wearing protective vests appeared through the trees, weapons raised. I lifted my hands. My dog responds to voice commands. One of the agents nodded. Call him back, Atlas. Heel. Atlas immediately left Voss and came to my side. The agent stared at him for a second. Good dog. Atlas looked at me as if he already knew. Voss was placed in restraints. Peter was separated from me. Then an older man appeared between the agents. I recognized him immediately. Thomas Vale. The admiral looked nothing like the man I remembered standing behind podiums. No uniform, no polished shoes, no staff, just a gray jacket and a tired face. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I said his name. Thomas, he nodded. Caleb. Atlas moved slightly in front of me. Vale noticed. I remember him too. I imagine he remembers everyone. Vale looked toward Voss. An agent was searching him near the tree line. You found Marrow. Owen made sure of it. Vale closed his eyes briefly when I said Owen's name. I felt anger return, not the explosive kind, the older kind. The kind that had been waiting 11 years. You stood at his memorial. Vale looked at me. Yes, you called him one of the finest men you had ever served with. He was, and all that time you knew. His shoulders lowered. I knew part of it. Everybody keeps saying that. I know. I stepped closer. Atlas came with me. You sold operational information. Vale did not deny it. Yes, Peter had told the truth. I almost wished he had not. Vale continued. I believed I was feeding commercial risk information through an intermediary. You sold routes, yes. Routes men like Owen were traveling. Yes, his voice shook. I told myself they were just numbers. I stared at him. Numbers do not have wives. He looked down. Or mothers. Vale said nothing. Or dogs waiting for them to come back. Atlas pressed against my leg. Vale swallowed. No. I could have hit him. Years earlier, I might have. Instead, I asked the question that mattered. Why are federal agents here? Vale looked toward the vehicles, because I called them. Peter stepped closer. What? Vale turned toward him. I started cooperating with a federal public corruption investigation 7 months ago. Voss heard him from near the trees. You lying coward. Vale looked over. No, Daniel. His voice became strangely calm. I finally stopped being one. Voss laughed bitterly. You think they are going to forgive you? Vale shook his head. I am not asking them to. That sentence silenced everyone. Vale looked back at me. The investigation began with financial records connected to Elias Warren. Then why chase us at the mill? Because when I learned you had the ledger, I knew Voss would follow. You threatened me. Yes, you said the ledger would destroy innocent people. It could. He looked at my jacket. Owen recorded everybody who touched those accounts. Some knew what they were part of, some did not. A book does not distinguish guilt from proximity. I thought about the pages, names, codes, payments. He was right about one thing. Evidence needed context. That did not make him innocent. Why not tell me? Because I did not know if you would believe me. I would not have. I know. He glanced toward Peter, and I did not know whether Peter had finally decided to tell the deceased truth. Peter gave a small, painful laugh. Took me long enough. Vale nodded. Took all of us too long. One of the agents approached. Mr. Mercer, we were told you may have recovered digital evidence. My hand went to the drive. Owen's words returned immediately. Do not give it to command. Do not give it to a contractor. Do not give it to anyone who approaches you first. Find someone who has nothing to gain. I looked at the agent. Who are you working for? She gave me her name and explained that she was part of a Department of Justice public corruption team working with criminal investigators outside the military chain involved in Owen's case. I still did not hand her the drive. I want a lawyer present. Understood. I want a forensic copy made before anybody touches the original. Understood. I want Owen Rourke's family notified before his name appears in any public statement. The agent paused, then nodded. We can document that request. Peter looked at me. I continued, and I want written chain of custody from the second I hand this over. The agent almost smiled. You really were a chief. Long enough, only then did I remove the blue drive. I held it for another moment, a small piece of plastic and metal. 11 years earlier, Owen had trusted that one of us might eventually reach it. He had trusted Peter to find courage. He had trusted me to ask questions. And somehow he had trusted Atlas to still be Atlas. I handed the drive over. That was the moment the chase ended. But the story did not. Not even close. The investigation lasted months. I spent more hours in interview rooms than I care to remember. So did Peter. The blue drive still worked. Owen had stored original radio recordings, internal messages, shipping records, route changes, and copies of communications between people connected to Warren's companies. The truth was uglier than I expected, and less simple. Thomas Vale had sold information. That was true. He had told himself it would only be used to manipulate contracts and insurance risk. That was also true. Then Elias Warren discovered that the same information had another market. Armed groups were willing to pay for movement patterns. Not always exact missions, sometimes just roads, time windows, vehicle types, enough pieces for someone on the ground to predict where Americans and their partners would be. Warren made money from both sides. Safer routes became more valuable after attacks. Security contracts grew. Transportation costs rose. Companies he controlled received new work, and men like Owen paid the real price. Vale learned what was happening after the ambush. Then Warren threatened his family and showed him records that could make Vale appear responsible for the entire operation. So Vale stayed quiet. For years, Peter stayed quiet, too, for different reasons, and I spent those same years blaming myself. That was the part nobody could give back. No court could return those nights. No investigation could change the road we drove that morning. No confession could bring Owen home. Elias Warren was arrested before winter ended. Several people connected to his companies were charged as the investigation widened. Some names in Owen's ledger were cleared, others were not. Vale admitted what he had done and agreed to testify. Peter did the same. Neither man asked me to forgive him. I respected them more for that. Forgiveness is a strange word. People talk about it like a door. You open it, you walk through. Everything changes. That was not how it worked for me. Some mornings I believed Peter had earned another chance. Other mornings I remembered Owen running through dust toward my position, trying to warn us. Both things could be true. Maybe that is what getting older teaches you. Life rarely gives you clean people and dirty people. Most of us are a mixture of courage and fear, and sooner or later we find out which one we feed. 3 months after Marrow, I drove back to Bellwether. Atlas sat beside me. This time I had enough money for gas, enough for food, and for the first time in a long while, somewhere I actually wanted to go. Rourke Mill was still closed during the investigation, so I stopped at the little cemetery above town. Owen's grave sat beneath a maple tree. I had not visited in 11 years. That was hard to admit. Atlas knew where we were before I did. He pulled gently toward the stones, then he found Owen. No command, no help. He walked straight to the marker and sat. I stopped several feet away. For a moment I was 39 again. Owen was laughing beside an aircraft. Atlas was young. Emily was waiting at home. My son still believed his father knew how to fix everything. Then the wind moved through the branches, and I was 58. Older, tired. Still here I walked to the grave. You were right, I said. Atlas looked up at me. I missed a lot. I took Owen's identification tag from my pocket. Investigators had returned it after cataloging the contents of the locker. I rested it against the top of the stone. I was angry at you for a while. My voice broke. I did not expect that. For knowing something was wrong and not telling me. Atlas moved closer. Then I realized you were trying. I looked at Owen's name. You were trying to keep us alive. The words became harder. I am sorry I took so long to understand. Atlas placed one paw on my boot. I laughed through the tears. You always have to do that? His tail moved. We stayed until the sun began sinking behind the ridge. On the way back to town, I made a phone call. My son answered after the 4th ring. Dad? Just hearing his voice nearly made me hang up. Old habits retreat before the difficult part. Instead, I said his name. Matthew, is everything okay? No silence. Then I smiled slightly. But I think it could be. He did not answer, so I kept going. I owe you an apology, Dad. Let me finish. Atlas watched me from the passenger side. I spent years telling myself I stayed distant because I did not want you worrying about me. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. The truth is, I did not know how to let you see me struggling. Matthew stayed quiet. I thought fathers were supposed to be strong. His answer came softly. You could have just been my dad. That hurt. Because he was right, I would like to try again. Another silence. Then he asked something simple. Where are you? I looked at Atlas. Virginia. What are you doing in Virginia? For the first time in months, I laughed. That is a very long story. Then tell I did. Not all at once, but I started. That mattered. Spring came late to Bellwether that year. By April, Green returned to the mountains. The river beside Rourke Mill ran high with snowmelt, and something unexpected happened. Owen's old property did not become mine. I was glad. I did not need another miracle inheritance. I needed a reason to get up in the morning. After the investigation released the mill, the local trust managing Owen's remaining estate asked what should be done with it. I thought about that for several days. Then I remembered Owen feeding Atlas dried beef overseas. I remembered the red leash. I remembered Emily telling me that I was never fully present. And I remembered how many men I had known who came home alive, but never really found their way back. I made a proposal, nothing grand, no luxury retreat, no speeches about healing mountains, just a working place. A place where veterans could spend a few weeks training rescue dogs and service dogs. A place where an older veteran who had forgotten how to talk to people could start by talking to an animal. A place where a man could repair a fence, clear a trail, drink coffee beside a river, and have somewhere useful to be the next morning. The trust approved it. Other veterans helped. The town helped. People donated lumber. A local veterinarian volunteered time. Peter sent money anonymously. I knew it was him because he was still terrible at being anonymous. We called the program Rourke House. The first year we worked with 7 veterans and 9 dogs. That was enough. I learned something there. A dog does not care what rank you held. He does not care whether you once commanded men or whether you spent last winter sleeping in your truck. He does not care how much money you lost. He does not care if your hand wash when thunder sounds too much like something from another country. A dog wants to know one thing. Are you here? Really here? Atlas had been asking me that question for years. Emily had asked it too. I just had not understood. One evening the following autumn, I sat on the porch at Rourke House. Matthew sat beside me. He had driven down with his wife and my granddaughter. My granddaughter was throwing a tennis ball across the grass. Atlas was supposed to be too old to chase it. Nobody had told Atlas. He ran after the ball like he was 5 years younger. Matthew watched him. You know he is going to regret that tomorrow. So you are not running. I have to listen to him complain. Matthew laughed. I looked across the property. 2 veterans were finishing a kennel gate near the barn. Another sat beside the river with a young shepherd resting against his leg. No miracles, no treasure, just people trying again. Matthew leaned back. You ever think about what would have happened if you ignored that envelope? All the time. What if you had driven away from the mill? I looked toward Atlas. He had returned with the tennis ball, but refused to give it to my granddaughter. She was negotiating with him poorly. I almost did. What smiled? Him. Matthew looked at Atlas. The dog, I thought back to that motel parking lot. The last money in my wallet. Rain against the windshield. A man who believed his best days were behind him. Atlas had refused to ignore Owen's scent. Then he refused to ignore the gate, the mill, the locker, the floor, the mountain. Again and again he noticed what I was willing to walk past. That was how Atlas saved my life the second time. He did not drag me away from an explosion. He did not knock me out of the path of a bullet. He did something harder. He made me stop running from being alive. I watched my granddaughter finally trick him into dropping the ball. She threw it. Atlas chased it into the evening sunlight. I could almost hear Owen laughing, and for once the memory did not hurt. Not the way it used to. Some people spend their whole lives searching for one moment that explains why they survived. I do not think life works that way anymore. Maybe surviving is not a debt you repay. Maybe it is an invitation to stay, to be useful, to tell the truth, to call your son, to forgive slowly. To let an old dog lead you through one more gate when you are absolutely certain there is nothing left on the other side. My name is Caleb Mercer. I was once a United States Navy SEAL. For a long time I believed that was the most important thing about me. I was wrong. I am a father, a grandfather, a friend who took too long to listen. And I am the man lucky enough to walk beside a German shepherd named Atlas. That is enough for me now, more than enough. Sometimes a second chance does not arrive as money, success, or an easy answer. Sometimes it arrives as a person who still answers the phone. Sometimes it is the courage to admit that fear made you stay silent. And sometimes it is an old German shepherd standing beside a gate, refusing to move until you finally pay attention. Caleb could not change what happened to Owen. He could not recover the 11 years he spent blaming himself. But he could decide what to do with the truth once it reached his hands. Maybe that is the lesson worth carrying with us. We cannot always repair yesterday, but as long as we are still here, we can choose what we leave behind tomorrow. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story from our channel. And if you would like, tell us in the comments what you believe truly saved Caleb in the end: Owen's hidden evidence, or Atlas refusing to give up on the man walking beside him.